Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leadership Voices. I'm your host, Jacob Geller, calling in here on a Thursday afternoon. Thursday, the first official day of March Madness, a day where some of your team members, progress on the day might go down. You wonder, what are they watching, right? Are they watching Duke about to blow it? I don't think Duke's going to blow it, but last time I checked, they were in a tight game. We'll talk about some of that, maybe not too much of it. The Oscars were this week. One battle after another, maybe a reflection of the times. It really swept the Oscars, it seems. Frankenstein, a lot of the design and costume awards. But March Madness also signifies an interesting time in the school year, right? Whether you're before your spring break, after your spring break, you're in the final sprint. You're in the final push to get to the end of the school year as a leader. Things are going a little crazy. Seniors could get senioritis at this point. Staff are making decisions if they're going to be there or not. And so it's a moment where school district leaders have to live in the present, finish the moment they're in now, finish the year strong, but you're also very much living in the year after, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that with our guest today. A guest who I'm really excited to have, someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years now, have had the pleasure of doing partnerships with, and someone I'm proud to call a friend. And so California native, someone who's been through all the different positions of a school district, calling in today, Deputy Superintendent from Bellflower Unified School District in LA County, Dr. Ryan Smith. Ryan, so excited to have you here. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you, Jacob. It's great to see you. Great to be here with you this afternoon.
It's great to see you too. Are you guys before spring break, after spring? Where are you in that cycle right now?
We're getting close. We have a couple more weeks. Our spring break is at the beginning of April, and
Okay.
people could really use it. We're feeling it around here. So spring break will be very welcome when it comes.
That's good. Okay, great. So spring break in mid-April, and then you go till mid-June, end of June, or when does it wrap
Beginning
up?
of June. Beginning of June.
Okay.
Yes.
So really the final sprint.
Absolutely. We're almost there.
Very nice. Did you fill out a March Madness bracket?
Of course I did. And I have Duke going all the way, so they better not blow it today in the first round.
Well, if you're checking the score, I think they're going to pull it off. But if you're checking the scores while we're in here, I understand that. Okay, you've got Duke. Any big upsets that you're predicting? I know you're a pretty big sports guy.
No, nothing major. I've got a couple, 10s beating 7s like everybody does in their brackets.
Sure.
Maybe a 12 beating a 5 here or there, but nothing major. I do like Duke, but we'll see. And for the record, I'm not watching it. I'm working. I have not been watching.
Okay, good.
I've been hard
And
at work.
if anyone I work with is listening, I am also not watching. All right, I promise.
We are working. We've been working.
Exactly, extremely hard. Well, I know that's true. You're a busy guy. You got your hands in a whole bunch of things. Every time I have the opportunity to visit you or meet with you, you're working on all sorts of different things, from the academic side to the personnel, to dipping your toes into AI and building even your own brand, giving your own perspective. So we're excited to have you here. Before we get into what you're up to now and Bellflower and all those things, we like to start with the how did we end up here? And so the question I ask is, how did you end up becoming a school district leader? Was this always the plan? If we take me back to, looking forward to spring break, high school Ryan Smith, up in the Bay Area, were you planning this, or how did you end up doing this work?
Wow. No, high school Ryan Smith had no idea he'd be working with high schools, however many years down later. I won't reveal the number of years. And it's interesting that it's March Madness, because that's really how I got into education. So I grew up in the Bay Area, and I went to college in San Diego. And I had really no idea what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, what I wanted to pursue. So when I started college in San Diego, I was a business major. And I just thought, I'll be a business major, maybe get something called an MBA, not even really knowing what an MBA is. And it'll be great. I'll be in charge of some company, maybe make a bunch of money, because that's just what you do as a business major, right? Not knowing anything about it or really being passionate about it at all. It just was kind of the plan. I don't even know where the plan came from. And I was miserable.
But it sounded like a good plan.
It sounded like a great plan. It all just come together. I'll take some business classes. And in reality, I was absolutely miserable. Being away from home is hard, so there's a big difference between the Bay Area and Northern California and Southern California. So I didn't make that adjustment very well. And then the first time away from family too. But two, I was just miserable. I didn't like anything I was studying, anything I was doing. So I was really a lost freshman. And the March tie-in is this, in high school, I played basketball and I loved it. And part of me, I knew I was never going to be good enough to play college or pro or anything like that. But I loved the game. And part of me always kind of thought, man, it would be nice to be a high school basketball coach someday. So in college, I hung around the gym a lot and hung around the basketball gym, and I got to know the coaches pretty well. And there was a coach who's in their team. I don't know if they're playing today. St. Mary's College's head coach, Randy Bennett. He was an assistant coach at the school that I was attending, and I got to know him a little bit. And he said, if coaching is something you're interested in, I might know a coach here in the area, a high school coach, who might be in need of somebody to help. And it was him taking that, just a little bit of time to pick up the phone and call somebody about me that led me to where I'm at today. I got connected with the local coach. His name was Chris Carter, Rancho Bernardo High School in the San Diego area in Powell Unified. And we hit it off. And I actually started coaching the spring basketball team at Rancho Bernardo High School when I was 18. Wow. And from there, I started coaching freshman ball at 19. And things just progressed from there. And I remember, I loved it. I just instantly fell in love. And I'm so blessed that those doors opened. It started with Randy, went to Chris Carter, who gave me the opportunity. And I'm so blessed and fortunate because I fell in love with coaching. And I'll never forget when Chris or Coach Carter told me, said, look, if you're going to pursue this as a career, you need to be a teacher. And not only be a teacher, right, you need to be a great teacher. And so he said, what's your major? And I said, I'm a business major. And he said, well, you're not going to be teaching at high school in business. There's literally one person, maybe two, that are, teach a business class, and they're not going to retire anytime soon. They hang on forever. He goes, so what else are you interested in? I said, well, history. And he said, no, everybody that's coaching is also a history major, a history teacher. Yeah, very hard to get jobs. He goes, you're going to need to be in math or science or special ed. And I didn't even realize what special ed was. So I don't even know what it is. I'm not interested in it. And I kind of knew, I obviously know what science is, but I thought, I don't know. I don't love it, but I could always do the numbers. I was always pretty decent at math. And so I thought, all right, well, I'll try math. And he said, good choice, because you'll always have a job. You will always have a job in education as a math major because there aren't enough math teachers, let alone great ones. True. And that was the best advice I ever followed. I changed my major, got a degree in math, got my first teaching job, coached, taught, and it was great. But there was a part of me that always wanted to do a little bit more. And so I got involved at one of my schools. I was blessed to work with a great principal who saw a lot of potential in me. And he said, look, if you're thinking about doing a little more, you might want to try administration. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the opportunity to maybe help out administratively, on a couple of days here or there, when our team is overwhelmed, you can be kind of the acting assistant principal and pinch hit. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And he gave me a radio, and I felt super official. I'm a radio, I'm walking around, that kind of thing. And so, but it was great. I loved working with students in that capacity. I loved helping the administrative team. And then eventually that led to my first administrative role as an assistant principal. And then that worked my way into the principalship. And then ultimately I was given the opportunity to serve in a neighboring district from where I'm at now in Bellflower in Paramount Unified, which is where we met and where we started working together. And I was an assistant superintendent there at the district level, my first district position. And I just love the opportunity to support teaching and learning from the district level and to be able to help provide the conditions that are so necessary to help students thrive. Then I had the opportunity to serve as superintendent in Monrovia, fantastic experience for me. Really proud of the accomplishments that we had there. And then eventually I came back kind of where I feel is home, this area, Bellflower. And I'm now the deputy superintendent and love the work that I do.
So yeah, it was not a plan in high school, is what you're saying. No, that's such what an interesting entry point. I think we ask that question pretty much every episode, and we've never had a person who had this to be the plan. It often feels like a calling mixed with opportunity, mixed with a little bit of luck, and always there's someone taking a chance on you. It's funny, you tell a basketball story and you say Coach Carter, like that, and like the infamous movie or famous movie.
Not that Coach Carter, a different one.
Not that Coach Chris Carter, but still, that it's really cool to see. Personally, my dad was my basketball coach, and he was a VP principal as well, and so I similar thing. Yeah, so he was a teacher, became a coach into administration. So I know that story.
Wow.
It's tough when your dad's your principal and your basketball coach, and you make the team and no one thinks that you deserve to be on the team. But I did. I wasn't the best, but I wasn't in the bottom three. So I deserve to be on the team. That's something I'll work on with my therapist, I guess. But getting back into it, what I want to know about is the decision each time to move up or through a school district, whether it's up to the assistant principalship, up into the district office, ultimately up into the superintendency, while they're, it takes on, more recognition, more responsibility, also gets further and further away from the students or the players in many ways. And so as someone who, represents himself as a student first leader, I'd love to know how you balance, what can be viewed sometimes as moving further away from the students, while also having a greater impact on the students that are under your purview.
Yeah, and great question. And every level that you kind of move up, you're right. You're right about being further and further removed from the classroom. And part of the trick for district leaders is to keep that connection going. And
Yeah.
so it's our responsibility when you become a director or an assistant superintendent, to remain connected to the classroom, just maybe in a different way than a building principal would be. For those going through a similar journey, and I can share kind of a little bit about mine. For me, it was always about how I could make a bigger difference for students. When I was coaching and teaching, I could make a huge difference as a math teacher for about 180, 200 kids a day or a year. But part of me always wanted to do more. Like, how can I be of greater influence, greater service, really, to students and to the school, parents, families, and even my colleagues in a different capacity. And so there's always a time at every step when you kind of feel like the time is right to kind of make that jump. And this is where, mentorship and colleagues that believe in you, and colleagues and friends that, take the time to give you an opportunity or chance are so critical, because throughout my career, I've been blessed to have people along the way. Dr. Ruth Perez, you got to know Dr. Perez when she was superintendent in Paramount. She's somebody that's believed very deeply in me and provided me a couple of opportunities in my career and influence, in others. And so I've been blessed to have connected with her. But those types of mentors and people that see that in you, that give you that opportunity to lift you up, are really, really critical. And so one of the things in my own leadership that I try to do is I try to return that favor and pay that forward. And so as I, have encountered teachers, directors, principals that are looking for kind of something new, something different, something more, they're looking for a similar kind of journey in leadership. I've always done my best to coach, counsel, mentor, and do whatever I can to help pull them up, just as others have done for me. Because that's what this work is all about. It's about being connected. It's about supporting one another. It's about believing in each other and being that piece that, being that person that someone can go to when they really, really need it. And so that's something that's, been a privilege to have had for me as a resource throughout my career. And I'm honored to pay that forward and pay that back to help others as well.
It's beautiful. And I think I can speak from my own experience with you. We were in a school together a couple months ago. I guess, it was a couple months ago now, at elementary school, which is different than you at a board meeting or a budget meeting or all these different things. And I saw you walk in, you're giving props to the grade 2 students. They're presenting their social contract, but you're checking in with the principal, you're checking in with the teacher, making them all feel seen. And what I got from that was that, I think, and I like the way you're positioning it, the scope of impact, you're really able to affect culture in, across so many different ways and so many different parts of a community in that way. So that really stood out for me, tagging along with you on that visit.
Well, thank you, Jacob. And that was a great visit, by the way. Woodruff is a great school. We have a great principal there, Dr. Nguyen. But that goes back to, the why, so why do we do this? And why do you have district leaders? Well, the whole purpose is what we saw together in that classroom. It's those students, and the purpose of district leadership is to support site leadership, to provide those incredible learning experiences each and every day for each and every student. And so it's a real pleasure and a real privilege to be part of that work and to be able to help lead that work or be a part of a leadership team that guides that work and provides those resources and support. Because the bottom line is there's nothing better than seeing students love school, seeing students love their teachers, love the staff that's supporting them, and achieve at high levels. And then over the course of time, it's great to see our students move on as graduates to do great things, whether they're in the world of work or service, or continuing their education. That's what this business is all about, are those moments. And so it's very, very special to be a part of it.
And I think about the version of you in San Diego, lost and looking for, Bennett or Carter, and could you be that to, middle school, high school students who are figuring out what am I going to do next, right? And I'd imagine you are, and you are that to the teachers who are figuring out their next phase and their principals that are figuring out the next phase. And so I think it's just such important work, and I think that's it's not easy work, it's not overpaid work, it's not it's difficult work, and so you're in the public eye, and I just commend you for that and everyone that does it. Before digging in a bit more to Bellflower, staying in the different positions within a school district, I'd love, because a lot of people that listen to this are, working their way through school districts, whether they're at lower level and working their way up. You're in a unique position where you held positions of deputy superintendency, assistant superintendency, and superintendency. Could you kind of quickly summarize what does each one actually take care of? Because sometimes from the outside, it can feel like that's a boss, that's a person we want to work with. So really, what's the difference? What does each person look out for?
Well, let's maybe start with what a superintendents.
Okay.
Superintendents, play such a tremendous role in school systems. Essentially, a superintendent is kind of the chief executive officer of the
Yeah.
school district. And, kind of like in the private sector, large corporations, that you have a CEO that reports to a board. It's no different than a school district where the superintendent reports to a publicly elected board of education. And a key part of the superintendent's role in the school district is, one, to make sure that the board's vision for the schools and the community's vision for the schools through that board is something that becomes a reality. And it's also critical for the superintendent, again, to enable the conditions that will make sure that students flourish throughout the system. And that means hiring the best possible cabinet, hiring the best possible directors, the best possible teachers, principals, bus drivers, and everybody in between that all believe in the district's mission, vision, and core values to make sure that the work of teaching and learning comes first. And I always say students first is most critical, but students first leadership orientation is so critical. And so superintendent's role is pivotal in any district. And I've had the pleasure of serving in that role. Right now in Bellflower, I work for an incredible superintendent, Dr. Erin Simon, who I'm excited for you to meet if you haven't already, Jacob. But she's wonderful. And she is somebody that is a transformational and visionary leader who really works together really closely, obviously, with our board, but also with us as cabinet to be able to make sure that we're fulfilling our mission, vision, and values. As deputy superintendent, not every district has a deputy superintendent. Some districts
Right.
have one that's similar, but they call it an associate superintendent. But you can think of a deputy superintendent as someone that falls right underneath the superintendent and might have some additional responsibilities beyond what a typical assistant superintendent might have some additional responsibilities to assist the superintendent with matters directly related to the board, those kinds of things. Here in Bellflower Unified, as I serve as deputy superintendent, I spend a lot of time in human resources, something I also wasn't sure that I would ever do. But I also support quite a bit our business services team, our ed services team, as well as our student support services team. And I work hand in hand with our superintendent, Dr. Simon, to make sure that the board's needs are met and that we're moving the work forward. As an assistant superintendent, again, very similar, very aligned work. As an assistant superintendent, at that position, you're typically focused on a key division as opposed to
Right.
cross-divisional work, such as the assistant superintendent of educational services that might be directly related to schools, teaching and learning, or the assistant superintendent of business services that could range anything from fiscal to transportation and to nutrition services and those kinds of things. So in a lot of ways, in the hierarchy in a cabinet, assistant to deputy or assistant to associate to superintendent, a lot of it has to do with cutting across divisions. And then all of it has to do with leadership, not only of divisions and departments in a system, but also across the entire organization to make sure that there's coherency.
I think that's extremely well put, and I think I might send it to my team as a training resource as well to better understand the role at the same time. But thank you for sharing that. I want to go to Bellflower now. Take us to Bellflower. Tell us a little bit about the school district. Every time I see you talk about it or the people that work there, your face is lighting up. Tell me a bit about the community and maybe stuff that you wouldn't be able to just quickly find on Wikipedia.
Well, what a great community. So this community is home. I've spent a good part of my administrative career, in area, three school districts now in this immediate area. I started in this area in Norwalk La Mirada, I believe paper has supported Norwalk La Mirada. I think you're familiar with that district. So I was principal at Norwalk High School and just loved my experience in Norwalk La Mirada. And then, as you know, I served as assistant superintendent in Paramount Unified School District, which is next door, and now serving here in Bellflower Unified School District, which is kind of right in the middle of them. It's like being home. And so I
Wow.
truly love this area and truly love this community. And so it's a privilege to continue to serve here. Bellflower Unified is just such a tremendous district. You know, one of the things that matters in any district is, first off, board leadership. You know, if the board's leadership isn't right, then nothing else will be. Well, in Bellflower Unified, we have a great board. We have a tremendous board of education that actually has 3 educators serving on the board. And
Wow.
what a difference that makes, because they understand the work. All of our members do, but in particular, our members that have educational backgrounds truly understand the work. And the ones that don't have direct educational experience care very deeply about the community and the work that's happening in schools. So together, there's this fantastic synergy at the board level. And we also have a tremendous superintendent who's forward thinking and visionary. And so together, that sets the conditions that makes everything start kind of moving and grooving, and everybody kind of starts moving along to it. And so it's really great to be here. We have a community that serves, you know, 3 different distinct cities. You know, obviously our namesake is Bellflower or Bellflower Unified, but we serve the city of Bellflower. We serve the city of Lakewood to the south, which is a little closer to Long Beach. And then we serve a piece of a city or a part of a city called Cerritos. All 3 of those cities have very unique, special identities. And so it's really neat to be in a district that serves such a diverse community. When you go to our schools, we have a diverse group of students. We have a diverse group of parents and families that we serve and community members. And it's really neat to see how all of that comes together in our schools. One interesting thing that's, you know, somewhat unique to Bellflower, although there's another district that has a similar configuration, then across the country, I don't know, I'm sure there's probably some schools out there, is we don't have true high schools and true middle schools. We have secondary schools. And in our case, our secondary schools are arranged from grades 7 through 12. So
Okay.
we have a kind of a combined middle school, high school concept that's been in place here in our district for many, many years now. And so our secondary schools, Mayfair and Bellflower, serve students in grades 7 through 12. And there's some positives to that. There's some challenges to that, but it's a configuration that's worked in our community for many years. And I think the thing, you know, you mentioned, I kind of smile when I talk about our district. Well, the biggest reason I smile when I talk about our district is we have great people here. It's just great to serve. It's an honor and privilege to serve. We have people that truly care about students and truly care about continuous improvement and wanting to continue to do the best job we can for kids. And so that's the secret sauce. When you have that in the district, it makes serving even more than a pleasure. It makes it an honor.
That's a great picture, and it sounds like a great place. I've had the opportunity to go many times there as well, and we're proud to be partners with Bellflower Unified School District, and proud of the work we're doing with you all. For you, what would you say? You know, I'm sure you have many things you're tracking. You've got strategic plans and LCAPs and all these different pieces, but you know, as you think about, you know, in your seat, so cross-functional in the way you described it, which I think, you know, cross-functional, horizontal versus the vertical is a really good way to think about it. What are sort of the top things, top priorities for you right now? Not to keep you up at night in that way, but what are your top priorities right now at Bellflower in your seat?
Well, this work will keep you up at night. You can
We're
text me
supposed
at
to be
2 or 3.
painting a positive picture, Ryan.
Well, that is positive, right? I mean,
Sure.
it is. I mean, in all the right ways. I'm referring. You know, like you could text me at 3 in the morning. I'd probably text you right back because I'm up thinking about
Well,
stuff. Not the healthiest thing, but again, it's the work and it's what I do and what I love. I'd say that probably a few things, you know, come to mind. Number one, I mentioned I spent a lot of time in human resources leading that division. One of the things that's so critical is making sure that the people that we invite to join our family are truly the right match for our schools and for our district. Having the right people in the right seats is really critical, and human resources is truly on the front line of that. So one of the things that's, you know, a very kind of heavy, serious part of the work we do is making sure that the teacher that we hire, the custodian that we hire, the principal that we hire, the director truly believe in the work that we're engaging here, truly believe in our mission, truly believe in our vision, truly believe and align with our core value of excellence. Dr. Simon talks a lot about excellence, and that's our standard. And we want people that truly ascribe to that. And so part of the key work that, me and my team, I'm blessed to work with two great executive directors, is making sure that each and every hire we make really meets that standard. And it's a really, really high one. And then on the flip side, sometimes we, make mistakes and, make mistakes. Sometimes you hire
Yeah.
folks that aren't good fits. Just as important is also, working to address that as well. And sometimes that means provide additional support. Sometimes that means provide additional training. Sometimes that means counseling. Sometimes that means, sometimes, hey, you're not a good fit and we have to part ways. But the core work is making sure the best people are in front of our kids each and every single day, because that's what our kids deserve. So that's one thing that, is, big in my world. I am fortunate, I get to lead our strategic planning effort, something that's new to Bellflower Unified. The district has never really undergone a comprehensive strategic planning effort. And so I'm really thrilled to lead that. I led that as superintendent in Monrovia and put together their first ever strategic plan. Had the opportunity to lead that in Paramount as well as assistant superintendent. And now Dr. Simon has tasked me with doing that here in Bellflower. And it's been great. It's something that I'm really excited about, because we talk about it being a framework for the future. We talk about our strategic plan being something that's going to guide how we're going to do teaching and learning in a different way for many, many years to come, to make learning more personal, more engaging, and more relevant for students. And we have a large team. We have almost 45 people from all sectors of our district. We have teachers, counselors, we have custodians, we have community members, college representatives, we have board members on our team that come together monthly to really sort through, our mission, vision, values, and how we can adapt and change those to make sure that there's greater buy-in and greater belief and collective understanding of them. But then also to create what we call a learner profile. And the learner profile are those outcomes, those dispositions, and those competencies that we expect each and every single student to have mastered by the time they leave our school system. And so we're talking about things like students being innovators, students being collaborators, students being responsible citizens. All of those are critical parts of that learner profile that, once in place, we will kind of build our system in a way that we're following and making sure that each and every way we know is a student on track for that in first grade, fifth grade, eighth grade, 12th grade. And along the way, what learning experiences are necessary and what conditions are necessary to make all of that happen. So that's really exciting work. We just launched that really in January, actually December.
Wow.
And it's moving along. Our next meeting of our guiding coalition, is what we call it, is tomorrow. And I can't wait for it. Those are the things that you just love doing because it's fun.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to see where that takes us. And I know our board and I know our superintendent are too.
When does that go in front of the board?
Well, we're still in the development phase. So eventually we meet monthly. So we're on meeting number 3. We're hoping to have a product that would go to the board in June.
Okay. So it'll sneak up on you. That's
it's coming
soon. But it's good. Progress. It's good. It's the book report is due. School never ends, right? You gotta give the big presentation. That's exciting work, and especially having led it at Monrovia and bringing that here, I think that's really, really valuable to the community. A question that I'm thinking about, when you talk about the unique situation of multiple cities, Cerritos, Bellflower, and Lakewood that you serve, and you think about strategic plans centrally developed, often unified in strategy. How do you balance, being unified and being system oriented with also understanding the diverse situations, whether it's in different school buildings, whether it's in different cities that you serve, and so it's a mix of always having equity in your design while also being systematic and unified in what you bring forth. So how are you balancing those two?
That's probably the key balance for district leaders to really be thoughtful about. And this is something that having served as a principal myself, and now having served as, cabinet member and then ultimately as the superintendent, it's really the most critical thing to get right, is at what point do you balance district authority with site autonomy?
Exactly.
And so in some districts, every district can be a little bit different, and I'm not going to criticize any approach, but in some districts, it's very heavy district led. This is how we do things in this
Yeah.
district, top down, and then schools are kind of tried more or less uniform in their approach. And then others you have completely the opposite. There's very little district central focus, and schools just kind of do what schools do. Personally, from my experience, it's best to try to find the right balance. Every school is unique, and when you serve multiple cities like most school districts do, not all, it's really important to respect kind of the unique identities and the unique circumstances that each school kind of presents themselves with, and that presents in that they have, because that's really critical. The other thing that's part of that is not just about where schools are or their uniqueness or the unique community, the demographics they serve. It's also about the history. A lot of times you also have to really account for, this school's history over the last 20, 30 years, has been its own unique journey. And so some things that would work well at one school might not work quite as well as another school because they've just had an incredibly different journey as a school community. And so it's up to district leaders to kind of strike that balance between ensuring that standards are incredibly high for all, ensuring that every student, no matter what part of a district, no matter what school they're in, has access to the same rigorous opportunities, the same high expectations, the same outstanding instructional opportunities, and the same, outstanding leaders throughout your district. That consistency is important. And you said it best, that equity piece is really something that we as district leaders have to make sure is in place. But you have to do it in a way where the school sites still have plenty of flexibility to do things that are going to be best for the students and the parents and families that they serve. And that's really the heart of leadership. And that's really where in a system, you have to be clear about vision. You have to be clear about mission. You have to be committed to equitably distributing resources and staying committed to that equity. But you also have to make sure that you have the best possible leaders in place, and you have that full alignment from the lowest level of leadership all the way to the highest to ensure that you can maintain that balance of site autonomy, but at the same time, there's clear district expectations.
I love the answer. I mean, it really is. I feel like it's a never-ending puzzle. It's little shifts. It's probably openness to be willing to make adjustments as well, and change your mind, and give a little here and get there. Even walking the schools with you, it's like this school clearly has its own personality, but it's also following things that we've set in place, and so that balance doesn't happen by accident, clearly, right? And I think that probably is alive in the strategic planning work that you're doing as well. I'm sure that's a big part of it. Something else I wanted to ask you about that you mentioned was when thinking about how to measure the success of your students and then the development of that, I noticed that you went to what could be considered more qualitative things. So a critical thinker, an innovative student, sense of belonging, pieces like that. Such an amazing way to think. Sometimes, people don't give the time for it because there's also the grade 3, ELA and the, algebra 1 and then the hard numbers that you have to hit. How do you think about, developing what some may consider the qualitative or softer skills with the, hey, I got a Cali dashboard that everyone can see, with these numbers on it, or are they actually two things working on the same goal?
Yeah, another great question, Jacob. Something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And I know my colleagues that I work with have, and I know that's a topic of conversation everywhere. The way I kind of think about it is this: students need to know things, right? Knowledge is super important. Students need to have skills. That's really important that they can demonstrate. But those dispositions are also critically important too.
Yeah.
If it was just simply all about hitting a certain test score or ensuring students had knowledge of specific things, if it was only about that, I think we'd be doing a disservice to the students when we hand them that diploma and send them on to college and career or whatever it is they may be pursuing. We have a responsibility to make sure that, students know how to work with other students, other adults. Students know how to respect diverse opinions, diverse thoughts on topics that they may not agree with. It's really critical that students are able to not just consume information, but also consume information, understand it, think about it critically, and have that little gut feeling that tells them that something's accurate, something's not. They're not being told the whole story, and how they might go about learning more so they can decide for themselves. Those are all really critically important, and they don't necessarily flesh out at report card time. where you
Yeah,
give a
exactly.
student, especially at the secondary level, where you give a student an A, B, C, or D in history, math, or science, or English, that kind of thing. So one of the things that's incumbent upon us as we're designing and we're thinking about our strategic planning process and that framework for the future is, if we believe in those competencies, those skills, so how along the way are we going to assess that? How will we monitor that students are growing in those areas and be able to communicate that in a meaningful way, not only to the student and the parent? And there's a number of districts that have done some great work here. We're partners specifically with a group called Learner Centered Collaborative, and they do quite a bit of work in this area, and we're a proud partner of theirs. And they have a number of schools that have really started venturing into this work, and we're excited to follow that. But that's in following and continue and lead in our own way. But we're really excited about that because those are pivotal things. It's the difference between saying those things and having a great poster and actually doing it and
Yeah.
actually showing that along the way, this is what this means for our school district. And these are the learning experiences we have to provide, or conditions that we have to establish to make sure that students can do that. And it's not that hard to do. It just means you have to be very thoughtful about it. So again, taking collaboration. If we really believe in collaboration and we define collaboration in a certain way, just throwing this out, where students can work well with one another, students can respect a differing point of view, students can work together to come to consensus on a point of view. If that's kind of your competency or your expectation, then you have to think, all right, in a sixth grade classroom, what does that look like? What evidence would I have to show that? And how would I go about communicating where a student is strong, where a student is kind of developing, where a student might be advanced in that area, to not only the student to help that person grow, but also, or that student grow, but also to the parent. So the parent can kind of go, yeah, I'm seeing this too in my own, in our home life. That's really critical. And for me, that's the work that lies ahead. And there's a lot of exciting models happening out there, especially, there's some really exciting secondary work happening right now where they're thinking about report cards differently, that are obviously standards based, but also capturing those competencies. So it's an exciting time, and we're really happy to be a part of it.
It's I think we could, we would need about a 3 or 4 hour podcast or longer if we really wanted to go into the root cause, and it's what you measure and where, and that's what drives what you teach and all these. So, but I think it's a great answer. I remember going through school here myself. I was the first year of the reform, and the reform, it was like a 15 or 20 year overdue overhaul of the way they were teaching. So we were the first ones that was like, not just the math question getting right, but explain, why the question is right. And so our teachers had no idea how to teach it. It was such a, we were the guinea pig. So we got pretty long leashes. I feel like all our grades were inflated because of that. But before we sort of move into the final phases of this, you talked about where I wanted to go next, sort of indirectly, which was when you talked about that critical thinking and your gut just knowing, this isn't right, this isn't real. And of course, I'm going to take us over to AI, where I've seen you present at conferences about the work you're doing within the district, you and your team, impressive work there. I think I'll open it up generally. You're someone who thinks a lot about this, writes about it, speaks about it. What would you say is the current state and the role of AI within public school districts?
Oh, wow. Well,
yeah, another 3 hours.
Whatever I say, now in 5 minutes, that literally could change, because that's how fast things are changing,
right,
with that particular topic and how things are evolving with it. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we never could have imagined some of the things that we're doing with technology, let alone AI. 90 days ago, we probably never could have imagined some of the advancements and developments with AI and agentic AI and those kinds of things that are happening. It's such a rapidly evolving and changing world. And so one of the things that, one of the ways that I've tried to think about this work and how this work impacts schools, is kind of in lanes, one, for a school district to approach this work, one critical lane are, what are your guidelines? What are your policies?
Yeah.
So what understandings do you have about how the district or how your organization is going to approach implementing AI? What are the guardrails? What are the safety things? What is the overall vision for using AI with students, just as you kind of laid out? And we were very blessed. We were kind of ahead of a lot of districts. One of our board members, one of our great board members, Brad Critchfield, he was president at the time, and he really drove bringing home and bringing to fruition a clear AI policy at the board level. And so we have that, and that policy really guides the work that we're doing in the other two lanes that I as I characterize the work, one of which is the most critical lane, teaching and learning. How do you use AI to really facilitate teaching and learning in a way that you're personalizing learnings for students, you're enhancing learning for students, and you're really helping students use AI as a tool, not as a crutch. And so that's probably the most difficult lane for schools to be in, because a lot of times the tendency for schools is to lean on, well, I used AI to create a lesson plan, or I used AI to, in my classroom, to generate a set of questions that are kind of personalized for my English learners or for my students with disabilities, my lower readers, my higher readers, and everybody in between, or whatever. And that's not so much teaching and learning. That's more the other lane that we refer to of
Yeah.
productivity, where you're using AI to be more productive. The teaching and learning, sweet spot is really helping students master AI and utilize AI in a way that they could do the work on their own. They have the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to do their work on their own, but they can harness AI to take that work and make something even more creative, or use it in a way to create something that they couldn't even produce on their own, but with their guidance and with their leadership and control of it, they were able to create something that's very clearly their work product, but it's at such a high level that you couldn't do it without the
Yeah.
technology. And so that's the most difficult spot to be in, because that requires really helping teachers understand how to go about using it in that way. It requires taking the time to be very thoughtful about at what point do you start introducing AI tools to help students and assist students. You don't want to do that too early, because you need students to be proficient in reading. You need them to be proficient with numeracy. Those kinds of things are really critical to have a firm foundation before you introduce AI tools on top of them. And then what does that look like throughout? So what does it look like for an eighth grader to write a research paper the way you and I did, where you spend a week in a library gathering all these sources and you write a report about, what you think about the death penalty, for an issue like that, versus
Sure. We'll pretend I spent a full week in a library.
versus,
We'll
that's
keep
true. Yeah, I know. I can't say I ever did, but maybe that's why I didn't have a great freshman year in college. Maybe that's why I was lost. But versus, that old school approach versus how do you use AI to really kind of research and really analyze, dig into a topic, kind of pursue ideas that are kind of against the one you might be thinking, those kinds of things. Very different use of it, and critical. The other thing that comes with that too, and this is where, we talked about kind of that gut sense, is it's really critical to help students understand that and develop that kind of inner voice about what AI is telling me might not be right.
Yeah.
It might be a hallucination, or it might not be exactly correct, but it needs to be exactly correct. Those are all skills that students really need, that exist in that teaching and learning lane, that are so critical. And so in Bellflower Unified, we put together a pretty good sized team, representative of all of our, of our stakeholders in our district. And we're really excited that we're just starting down the road, and we're working on that together to really develop, well, what will that framework look like in Bellflower? How will we go about navigating those three lanes in a thoughtful, responsible way, where humans aren't being replaced? Not at all. Humans remain the center of everything, but we're using AI in a way to enhance the work that we do.
It's a great answer, thorough, and clear, and I think embracing without going crazy with the AI. I think is not fighting it, not holding it back, understanding it's here, and I think having I think it was Brad, you mentioned the board member, having them be so forward and bringing it to the table early, so that ultimately the students end up not losing. Right? I think that's really exceptional. I know we're coming up towards the top of the hour here. I want to kind of close off with a couple sort of questions, in summary of the conversation. End of the year, it's June 30th, or we're turning over to July 1. How do you know that you've had a strong end to the year? What would have to happen between now and then?
Well, I'm going to share something our superintendent says a lot, because it's really resonated with me. Every school ready. That's something she says a lot, as
I like
we're
that.
aiming for I love it too, every school ready, and specifically what that means is making sure that every school is prepared for not only where they're at in the journey, but also prepared for where they're headed on that journey. And so as we're winding down a school year, the things that I'm always mindful of are, where, number one, there's still lots of room for teaching and learning. So staying
Yep.
focused on that. That's critical. We only get 180 days of these students, or 180 days with our beloved students. Every one of those days needs to be a masterpiece. So number one, staying focused on teaching and learning. But number two, along the way, still finding time to celebrate. Because over the course of a year, you think about that journey from August all the way to June, there's so many great things that happen. And I'm a believer in celebration. And so what are those celebrations looking like? Celebrating the hard work our eighth graders put in as they transition to ninth, or the hard work our fifth graders, have put in as they transition from fifth to sixth to seventh. Our first time students in TK or even kinder, what are their accomplishments? Those celebrations are important. And for me, my favorite time of year is the end of the year, because I truly do love going to our promotions and going to the awards ceremonies. I love seeing our seniors and hearing all the scholarships they get, all the different things that they've achieved. And then I love our graduation. So that celebration piece is really critical. But back to Every School Ready, it's also being prepared for the next school year. You don't just kind of close out a school year in June and you go, okay, well, let's start getting ready for 27, or 26, 27. No, the preparation for 26, 27, believe it or not, started like in October, November, but it really ramps up the closer you get, obviously. And so for me, it's also being, making sure that we're prepared. We've got summer school ready to transition, our summer learning opportunities. And we're also thinking very carefully about, all right, are we ready to open in August again? So for me, those are all the things that I track and that I stay focused on. But I think that piece about celebration and about remaining focused till the very end on teaching and learning for me is probably the most critical.
It's a beautiful idea. I'm going to steal it. It might be the title of this episode. I like that. Every School Ready. As we close out, I want to kind of finish where we started. But now you're sitting in this role. You're talking to the San Diego basketball superstar Ryan, a little lost, and maybe it's Ryan, but we extrapolated it out to the first year teacher, the principal who's not sure if this is for them, someone that has gone through so much of this journey. Not that your journey's over, I think it's just beginning. What's your advice to someone who's considering getting into this line of work? And please don't scare off our listeners.
My advice is keep the focus on the students. Be a student, what I call a student's first leader. You can't go wrong by always keeping students at the center of the work that you do, whether it's teaching, whether it's principal, assistant principal, director. Your true north really needs to be what's best for students. And if you keep that as your focus, you can never go wrong. And for me, when I've been faced with a hard decision, or I've been put in a tough spot, or I'm kind of mulling over something that's difficult or really wrestling with it, I always go back to what would be best for students in this situation? What can I do that will make something better for a student, even if it's one student? What could I do to put that student in the best possible position to learn, to grow, and to thrive? So my advice to anybody pursuing it is keep students first.
It's beautiful and a great place to end. Duke did lose the game, unfortunately. I'm just kidding. They won.
Okay, I was going to say, I have to get my bracket to put a bunch of X's all the way across.
No, I had to do it too. But Ryan, thank you so much taking the time out of your busy work. We're excited to see the strategic plan and how that all gets presented, but more importantly, how it rolls out and all the students that it impacts. I personally just want to say thank you for the friendship, and I'm better at what I do because I gotten to know you over the last 5-6 years. I'm excited to continue and see where you go next on your journey. And I think any district and any school, any student that is lucky enough to be near you is really feeling that impact. So thank you for being part of the episode today. I appreciate you and the work that you do. Any final words?
Thank you, Jacob. Pleasure talking with you. Thanks for being a great friend, great partner. I've really appreciated all the support you've given to me in the schools and the districts that I've worked in. So thank you for everything, truly.
All right, everyone. That was Dr. Ryan Smith, Bellflower Unified Deputy Superintendent, joining us here on Leadership Voices. I'm your host, Jacob Geller. We'll see you next time. Take care.